Let me tell you an incredible story. It's about how the world's very first jet fighter, a weapon that on paper should have completely changed the outcome of World War II, was ultimately defeated. But here's the twist. It wasn't beaten by a bigger gun or a faster plane. Nope, it was beaten by a simple but incredibly courageous shift in thinking. And honestly, this isn't just a history lesson. It's a masterclass in how clever strategy can overcome a terrifying technological leap. Okay, I want you to put yourself in the cockpit. It's 1944, you're an Allied pilot flying a P-51 Mustang, which is, by the way, the absolute pinnacle of piston engine technology. You're the king of the sky. And then, out of nowhere, something just streaks past you. It's moving over 100 miles per hour faster than your top speed. And the weirdest part? There's no propeller. It's just silent power. In a straight chase, you have zero chance. It's uncatchable. And in that one single moment, you have to realize that every rule of air combat you've ever learned, the rules you've literally staked your life on, has just been completely and terrifyingly rewritten. And this wasn't just a hypothetical. This was the chilling reality. That quote you see, that's from October 5th, 1944. And what those pilots saw sent an absolute shockwave through Allied command. I mean, sure, for years they'd heard whispers and rumors about some kind of German jet project, but rumors are one thing. Seeing it with your own eyes is another. This wasn't a rumor. It was a silent silver dart screaming through the sky. This was the Messerschmitt Me 262, and it was very, very real. The arrival of the Me 262 wasn't just a problem, it was an immediate strategic crisis. You have to think about the bigger picture here. The whole Allied strategy relied on these massive bombing campaigns, with huge, slow-moving B-17 bombers flying deep into Germany to cripple their industry. Well, these new jets could dive on those bomber formations at unbelievable speeds, fire their cannons, and then just punch the throttle and disappear before any of the escort fighters, like the Mustangs, could even get into position to react. If the Luftwaffe could get enough of these wonder weapons in the air, the entire air war was at risk of a catastrophic, game-changing failure. And let's be crystal clear about this. This wasn't just about a faster plane. This was about potentially losing the entire war in the air. For the first time in a long time, after years of clawing their way to dominance over the skies of Europe, Allied commanders were facing the very real, very terrifying possibility of losing it all. The stakes, they just couldn't have been any higher. But, and there's always a but in these stories, isn't there? As Allied intelligence frantically started piecing together every scrap of information they could find, pilot reports, grainy reconnaissance photos, everything, a different picture started to emerge. They discovered that this revolutionary, seemingly invincible technology had a secret. It had a fatal flaw, a vulnerability hidden not in its futuristic design, but deep inside its groundbreaking engines. See, the heart of the Me 262 was this thing, the WW2 engine. And make no mistake, it was an absolute engineering marvel, a true quantum leap in propulsion. But it was also first-generation tech. Think of it like the very first smartphone. It's revolutionary, yeah, but it's also buggy, the battery life is awful, and it's incredibly temperamental. The WW2 was, quite literally, the jet's Achilles heel. And when you dig into the details, you really see the central paradox of this plane. First off, this engine was an absolute fuel hog. It burned through its special J2 fuel so fast that pilots only had about 60 to 90 minutes of flight time, total. Then there's the lifespan. The turbine blades were made without the high-tech heat-resistant metals Germany just didn't have late in the war, so they would literally stretch and deform. The engine needed a complete overhaul after just 10 hours of flight. That's maybe 3 or 4 missions if you're lucky. And the craziest part? The throttle. In a normal plane, you can jam the throttle forward for more power. If a 262 pilot did that too quickly, too much fuel would hit the engine and it could literally overheat and melt in midair. This whole thing was a logistical nightmare. So, all of this leads to a really fascinating question, right? If you can't possibly catch the world's fastest fighter up at 30,000 feet, where on earth can you fight it? Well, that sluggish, fragile engine created 2 very, very specific moments of extreme vulnerability for a plane that was, otherwise, completely untouchable. The answer was right at home. During its long, 30-second takeoff roll, the jet was basically a predictable straight-line target. Its engines were struggling to build up thrust, so it couldn't turn, it couldn't dodge, it couldn't do anything. But landing? Landing was even worse. By then, the fuel gauges were practically on empty after a short mission. The pilot had to slow down, put his flaps and landing gear down, and fly a very stable, predictable path to the runway. He didn't have enough fuel to go around for a second try. So this invincible predator at high altitude, it became a helpless sitting duck right above its own airfield.
And this revelation was the key. It was a total game changer. Allied intelligence suddenly realized they didn't need a faster plane. They just needed a smarter strategy. They knew they couldn't win the Me-262's game, that high-speed, high-altitude fight. So they decided, fine, we won't play their game. We'll make them play ours. They changed the battlefield, shifting it from the wide-open skies down to the airspace directly over the German jet bases. And this thinking led to a beautifully simple but absolutely deadly three-step playbook. Step 1, identify the bases. Remember that special J2 fuel? Well, it was only available at a handful of specific airfields, so you knew where to look. Step 2, loiter and wait. The P-51 Mustang with its huge fuel tanks had incredible endurance. It could stay airborne for hours, just circling patiently high above these known bases, waiting. And then Step 3, ambush. The moment a jet was spotted taking off or landing, the Mustang's pilots would use gravity as their best friend, diving down to build up incredible speed and attack the jets when they were at their absolute slowest and most helpless.
Of course, this sounds simple, but it was anything but easy. There was a huge catch. The Germans weren't stupid. They knew this was their weak point, so they surrounded their jet bases with what the Allied pilots called flak alleys. These were unbelievably dense curtains of anti-aircraft fire from hundreds and hundreds of guns. So to pull off this new strategy, pilots had to summon immense courage and willingly fly right into the most heavily defended airspace in all of Germany.
You know, a plan is just a theory on a piece of paper until someone has the guts to actually go out and do it. And in this story, two young American pilots, Lieutenant Urban Drew and Captain Chuck Yeager, would become absolute legends by putting this high-risk, high-reward theory into practice and proving to everyone that it could be done. So, on October 7th, 1944, get this, just 2 days after that first shocking encounter we talked about, a 21-year-old Urban Drew led a mission against the Akmaka Air Base. He dove his Mustang straight through a wall of flak, and in less than 2 minutes, he shot down two Me-262s. One was taking off, the other was trying to get off the runway. But in a cruel twist, his gun camera jammed, and his wingman was shot down. So can you imagine? For nearly 40 years, his incredible claim went unverified until German archives were finally opened and confirmed his story was true all along. A month later, another pilot you've probably heard of made his own calculated gamble, Chuck Yeager. He saw a group of jets attack his bomber formation and then just vanish. But instead of giving up, he thought like a hunter. He guessed where they had to be going to land, dove through the clouds, and sure enough, found a lone Me-262 lining up for its final approach. As Yeager later said with his classic cool, "First time I saw a jet, I shot it down." He proved Drew's success wasn't a fluke. The hunter's playbook worked. Now, these incredible stories of individual heroism by pilots like Drew and Yeager, they weren't just isolated incidents. They were proof of concept. They were part of a much larger strategic success. This systematic hunting of the Me-262s right at their front door ultimately neutralized the jet threat entirely. And the final numbers, well, they don't tell a story of technological dominance. They tell a story of tactical and strategic failure. Okay, let's look at the hard data, because this is where the true scale of the problem becomes so clear. Germany produced over 1,400 of these jets. On paper, that sounds terrifying, but in reality, because of the bombing of their factories, training accidents, and those constant maintenance nightmares, only about 300 ever actually saw combat. And on any given day, the entire Luftwaffe might only have 25 jets ready to fly, and they were facing an Allied fighter force of over 5,000 planes. The math was just completely, hopelessly insurmountable. The wonder weapon was really just a ghost, powerful but rarely seen. And the American Mustang pilots, they got good at this. They got really good. They became specialists in hunting jets. Yeager's unit, the 357th Fighter Group, they became the top jet-killing group in the entire Air Force. They and others like them completely turned the tables. They transformed a defensive problem into an offensive hunt, and they just relentlessly exploited the jet's vulnerabilities until the threat was contained. So, what's the big takeaway here? Ultimately, the Me-262 was a technological marvel that simply showed up too late, and in too few numbers to solve Germany's real fundamental problems. You see, they had a faster plane, but they were running out of fuel to fly it, they were running out of experienced pilots to man it, and they were running out of time to make any of it matter. It's such a powerful lesson. The most advanced technology in the world can't save you if your underlying strategy and your logistics are completely broken. And this whole story, it leaves us with a really powerful question for our own lives.
We all face challenges, right? Problems that seem impossibly fast, or overwhelmingly advanced, or just plain unbeatable. But the lesson of the Me 262 is that every single system, every single problem, no matter how intimidating it seems, has a takeoff and landing phase. It has a hidden moment of vulnerability. So the real question isn't always, how do I get faster, or how do I get more advanced? Sometimes the better question is, where is my opponent's airfield? Where are those hidden moments of weakness in the challenges that seem so unbeatable in your world?